How's it going, Patreon guys? This is the second exclusive tutorial for this month. I am so happy with this render. I think it's beautiful. I think it's just very atmospheric. And this is the whole scene here we're looking at. And we're going to go ahead and tackle this and how we're going to, get these spheres to be locked onto this guy and just making this material. So let's go ahead and dive straight into making that. So I'm just going to go ahead and use another Blender file here and start from scratch. So here we are. I'm going to go ahead and just delete everything we have here and make sure we are in the Eevee render engine. I'm turning on ambient occlusion, bloom, screen space reflections, and motion blur for this render. So first off, let's go ahead and tackle what I think is the most interesting part of this animation, which is how to get those spheres to be rolling around our sphere. So I like to use the isosphere, whatever you want to pronounce it as, and I'm just going to subdivide it here all the way to 10. So now we have this guy here. I'm going to go ahead and right click and shade smooth. So the way we're going to get these balls to go around our big guy is to go ahead and get the curve circle. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift D and then duplicate that sphere. So now I'm going to get this sphere number 2, go here to my constraints right over here, and I'm going to get follow path. And then what that's going to do is we're going to go ahead and pick our target, which is our Bezier circle. And now it's going to be locked onto that circle that we created. And then we're going to scale it up, something like this, and then make this guy whatever size we want to go for. So something like that. And then we're going to go ahead and click back on our Bezier circle here and scale it up till the sphere is just barely touching so that it looks like that. And then here on the actual Bezier circle, I'm going to go ahead and click on these settings here, bring your resolution up here on both. So now we have this. What I'm going to do is make my animation at 240 frames. So 240, that's going to give us a nice 10-second animation. Now the reason why I'm going to animate this so we can show you how to make the balls look like they're actually rolling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the left arrow to go to frame 0, super important for looping. And I'm going to click this, go to my constraints, and then right here on offset, let me just bring this over a little bit. So right here on offset, we're going to click keyframe, go to the end and type in 100. And then we'll enter, click that, and then now we have this guy going around just like that. And if we go here to the end, it's a perfect seamless loop. So now let's go ahead and shade this guy, because if we want to rotate it now, the way it's shaded, you wouldn't even be able to tell it's rotating. So let's go ahead and make our quick little material. So click on over here to shading. I'm going to hit the period key to go straight to the view here, make him the origin. I'm going to click new, and then let's make this metallic, and then I'm going to go ahead, Shift A, and get a mix, M-I-X, mix shader, and then we'll get emission. Plug that there. I'm going to go ahead and pick a nice blue, give my strength at 10, and then plug that there. So now they're just going to be mixing together, but not very well. I'm going to go ahead and get a color ramp right here, color ramp. Plug the color into the factor. Right here, I'm going to go from linear to constant because I want these circles to have a hard edge. And so now we're going to get a wave texture. I'm going to hit Control T, having the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. You can turn that on here in the preferences in your add-ons. Type in Node Wrangler. Comes with Blender by default, and we're going to use the object offset. Let's plug color here into the color ramp. And so now we have these nice little circles. And I'm going to go just make something like that. And then with this color ramp, you can adjust the size of them. So I'm going to bring them around, right around that size. So that looks really good. We'll come back and edit this a little bit more if you want. So how do we make this guy look like it's rotating? Simply, we just rotate the axis, the rotation of this guy. So we're going to go back to frame 0. And then I believe it is the Z axis for me. Click that. And for me, I found it to be rotating it 6 times. So what we'll do a little bit of Blender math. So 360, and then use the asterisk times 6. And Blender does that math for you, and it'll give you that 2160. So that's the rotations, and it'll give you a perfect perfect rotation basically. And what that does is it makes it look like it's behaving correctly. So it rotates it on the right speed, because if you don't have the correct speed, it won't look like it's actually rotating on your sphere. So now you have that, and what's really great about Blender is if you just double click these guys, hit Alt D, and then you just click on the Bezier circle. I'm gonna hit R twice, and then it just locks to that new one. And then if you do Alt D, you basically make a instance of this, and it doesn't add any heaviness, anything to your whole scene. And so that's how you go ahead and just duplicate all these, and you can go ahead and just make as many as you want, making sure they're not intersecting, or if you want them to intersect, that's completely up to you. So that's how you create this little thing right here. It's really cool. Super simple. We're not using any kind of dynamics or anything special or crazy like that. Super easy. Now let's go ahead and start making the material for the center here, centerpiece. So we'll go back to shading. I'm gonna hit the period key, zoom in a little bit. So we're gonna go here and make it metallic. I'm gonna hit Shift A. We're gonna go ahead and get a color ramp, and let's make sort of the OG grunge material I do all the time with a Musgrave, M-U-S, oops, M-U-S, Musgrave texture. I'm gonna hit Control T, using the object coordinate here, plug the height here, luminosity, dimension down to 0, detail up, scale 0.3. I'm gonna bring the black up a little bit here on the color ramp so we get a nice, a nice silver. And then let's see, bring the color down a little bit. Now we're gonna go crazy with some bumping. So let's go ahead and hit G to move this up. I'm gonna get a bump node, plug that there, and let's go ahead and make some big dents. So let's get another color ramp, plug the color there, get a noise texture in OI, and we're gonna just make some really quick gashes basically into here. So I'm gonna use the vector output of this one, plug it to here, and I'm gonna plug the color ramp here. And then plug the color of the color ramp into the height. So now we have all this craziness. What I'm gonna do is bring the detail up, and then let's see. We're gonna bring the white portion in until we have, a fair amount of gashes, and then we can play with the strength of the bump. And just play with that and see how much denting and gashing do we wanna have in this guy. You can play with the scale, all that fun stuff. Really just edit this to your liking. Now what we're gonna do is get the bump node, hit Shift D, get another bump node, plug that into the normal, plug the bump to the normal. Now we're going to get a Voronoi because we're going to make some cracks. So V-O-R, so Voronoi, and I'm going to hit Control T. We need a whole new setup because we're going to do some fun stuff in a second. Let's get the distance here into the height. I'm going to bring my strength up here for now, and I do want to get a color ramp, so I'm going to hit Shift D, plop him right there. And then we're gonna just bring that to normal, and we're gonna go from F1 to distance to edge, and that's gonna give us kind of a rocky pattern. So then we can take this in here, and just squeeze that until we like that. I'm gonna bring my scale to something like that, and then again, we can take this and put it like that. Now we're not done with cracks. We need to add some detail into these cracks because they're too planar. So bring it over here, Shift A, noise texture. Plug the noise texture right there, and now it's just going to completely ruin our Voronoi texture. So we need to go ahead and get a mix RGB, and we'll plug him there. Now, this may not make sense for you if this is your first time doing this process. I'll explain it in just a second. And then we'll get the object coordinate put into color too. So we have our noise texture adding this detail. So what we're going to do is bring our factor back to where it was. So this is, if we bring our factor of the mix RGB, it's as if these two nodes don't exist. We're just seeing this. Now if we bring it this way, it's this noise texture completely affecting. So what we're going to do is bring it in a little bit so that it's affecting it. We're going to bring some detail in there. And now we have some nice cracks in our material here. And then I'm going to bring my scale up some more. And now we have a really, really cool material for our render that our little spheres are dancing around the scene. So now we have this whole situation here. Let's go ahead and make the floor. So I'm hit Shift A, get a plane, hit S8, and then I'm going to go ahead and see where's the lowest these guys go, and then take my plane and go down like that. So now we have this. I'm going to hit Control A to apply scale, hit Tab, right click, subdivide, and we'll get our number of cuts at 100. Just like this. Now, let's go ahead and get in a subdivision surface and a displacement modifier. Get our displacement, click New, click this little button here to go to a texture, and we're going to pick Distorted Noise, and then here we'll pick cell noise and pick cell noise. I'm going to go back to the modifier and bring our scale down pretty far and our levels on the viewport up a little bit. Go back to the texture, and we're going to go play with the size. I want it to be pretty considerable size, and then on our amount, we're going to add some detail here, and then bring that size up some more, something like that. And then now we have a nice greebled out kind of scene here, and I'm going to put my render at 3, because if we render it here, you can see at render at 3, you get these perfect looking sharp cubes, but that might be really heavy in your scene, so you can put your levels viewport a lot farther down. What I'm going to do now is get my camera going. I'm going to hit Shift A, get a camera. I'm going to point my scene kind of where I want it to be, so Control Alt 0, snap it to view. Now I'm going to go click on the green camera icon, go from perspective to orthographic, and then I'm going to hit G to kind of play with that and to see how I feel about this whole scene. So that's looking pretty cool. Now let's go ahead and light this. So I'm going to go back and reference how I originally lit it. So one here, one back there. So before I get the lighting going, I do want to make sure my materials are all looking correct, because the way your materials behave is going to be how your lighting looks. So I don't want to light it yet. I want to actually shade this floor. So I'm going to go ahead and go to shading. I'm going to hit 0 to go to my camera view. I'm going to click on the plane, and we're going to click new. And then I'm going to go ahead and make this metallic and make it really dark, because I don't want this to take away from the emphasis, which is this sphere with the guys rolling around it. What I'm going to do now is get a color ramp, COL, color ramp, and a noise texture. Plug this here, Control T, of course the object coordinate, plug the factor to the color ramp, and plug the color into the roughness. Now we're going to get some roughness fun going on here. You can see it happening. What I'm going to do is bring up the detail and bring up the scale here. I'm going to bring my color ramp in and bring it closer to a gray so it's not completely crazy and reflective. Now we have a little bit of fun there. Let's go ahead and do some bumping. So BUM, plug the bump, plug the normal here, and we're just going to do one quick little Voronoi thing. So I'm going to get color ramp so we can crunch it in a little bit. So let's get the color here to the height. Let's go get that Voronoi. We're going to get a very modern looking Voronoi texture here. I'm going to get the vector here to the vector, and we're going to get our distance. So strength is too high. We're going to do something like this. I'm going to go to Elucidian to Chebyshev, and we're going to go to F1 to F2. So we get more detail in that texture. And then now we're just going to crunch it in so that we get these little squares. I think actually I might need Manhattan. No, actually it might be Chebyshev. Okay. So yeah, so we'll go through here, and now we have a bunch of subtle little details in our background, which the lighting will have a lot of fun with. So now we have that. Now we can actually start to light this scene. So I'm going to hit Shift A, get a light, get an area light. I'm going to hit G to push it back, and I want to have it right here clipping the back end of it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit R twice to rotate it like this, scale it up, maybe bring it up, and then we're going to go to the view, make it nice purple, really bright. I'm going to give it like 2000. Actually way too bright. We'll go with 500 for now. And then we're going to go ahead and get in another area light. I'm going to hit G, bring it over here, right about there. I'm going to hit R twice, rotate it, and then I'm going to go ahead and scale it up, make it a nice blue, similar to that blue, power of 1000. And so far, we have a pretty cool looking scene. So we're getting somewhere pretty quickly. All right, now what I'm going to do is go to HDRI Haven. HDRIhaven.com. I'm going to type in night, N-I-G-H-T. This is actually the same HDRI I used in the last tutorial here on Patreon, which is this one right here, and I'm going to download the 4K version. It's already on my desktop, so I'll show you how to import that. So go to your world settings, click on the little yellow dot, click on environment texture. I'm going to click open, and then I'm just going to navigate to where I saved it, which it's right about here. And then now we have this nice HDRI. The reason why I'm importing it because it's a little too dark. And so I'm going to give it strength of 0.3. And now we have a little bit more interesting lighting, and it's a lot more even here on our emphasis point, which is right there. So now we have this going on, which is super cool. What we're going to do now is get some leading lines to go through with our composition. So I'm going to hit Shift A and get a curve path. I'm going to hit the tilde key, which is right above the tab key for me. And I'm going to go ahead and find that. So it's going to be right here. I want it to scale up to fit the scene. And then I'm going to bring it over like that. And then I'm going to hit Shift D, bring it over like that. So now we have these two guys. I'm going to go ahead and make sure they're right down here like that. And so these two leading lines are going to be really nice for composition. So they're pretty good like that. Now let's go ahead and model them really quick. So I'm going to click on one of them, give it a little bit of geometry here in this little section right there. I'm going to give the depth, bring the depth up a little bit so we have some geometry going on. And then we'll go ahead, click New in the Materials, go to Emission, give it that blue, and give it a strength of 10. So now we have a leading line doing that. I'm going to go ahead and click on him again and look at his exact setting. So it looks like our depth is 0.003. So I'm going to click on this other one, paste in, and then we're going to go ahead and give it that glowing texture. I'm going to hit the tilde key again to go to the top, and then I'm going to hit Shift D. I click R and just rotate it by 90 degrees. I'm just eyeballing that, and then I'm going to go ahead and see how that looks rendered. So now we have some really cool looking scenes here, and these really nice leading lines to bring your eyes straight to the emphasis point of our render. Now you'll notice in my animation, there's a very atmospheric vibe of this animation. That's one of the big reasons, is something that I need to add to the material of this main image. So we're going to go back to shading, and then I'm going to go ahead and get in a mix shader, MIX. We're going to go ahead and get some Fresnel going on with some emission. Now right about now I need to save my scene, so I'm just going to call it TUT2 and save it on my desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and get an emission node that's blue, nice blue, plug that into the shader, bring this up. We're going to get a color ramp. So COL, I use color ramps constantly. We're going to also get a layer weight, LAY. So we'll get this layer weight to go right here, and we'll get Fresnel, plug Fresnel right there. So now we have that. We can play with the Fresnel until we like it, and then we'll bring the strength up of our Fresnel. This needs to be more of a deep blue, something like this. And then we'll go here to the original lighting and then play with our blend until we like how that looks. So we're going to bring our blend back a little bit. So now that really gives it more of an atmospheric feel, really nice looking way of just existing. So now we have this. One thing we need to do is kind of animate our sphere. But before we do that, we need to actually parent these guys to our sphere. So before you have everything added, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this one, and this one. And then the last thing we're going to click is the sphere. Control P and click Object. And what that's going to do is have all those objects follow my sphere, and that's really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit Preferences, Animation, and we're going to make it Bezier so that we have a nice smooth animation when our sphere goes up and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and start at, actually we're going to start at frame 1, and I believe it's this up and down the Z axis. So we're going to start at the upper portion, click this. I'm going to go over here to frame 60, and we're going to click it again. So now it's looping, and then we're going to bring it down to be like right about there. So now he goes up and down. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these last two keyframes, Control C, and then every 30 frames paste it in. So 150, I believe. and then we'll go to 210. And then now he loops seamlessly, going up and down. And then the last thing I'm going to do is go back here to frame 0. Here on this guy, I'm going to animate him going rotation of Z. So clicking that, go to the end, 360. So now he's going to go, I messed up one thing. I'm going to clear the keyframes. And we need to actually go back into our preferences and go from Bezier to linear. And then we're going to redo that. So frame 0, start at 0 rotation, go to the end, 360. And now we have this really nice animation with these spheres going around. You can add as many spheres as you want. I added quite a few to my my ending render here. Last thing I'm going to do is add some depth of field. So I'm going to click on my camera, click on the little green camera, click depth of field, and I'm going to bring my f-stop all the way down so that I can zoom in and play with my focus distance until it focuses directly on the sphere or whatever you want it to focus on your render. And then I'll bring my depth of field back a little bit until I like how it looks. I'm going to click render, render image, and to see how it looks in the final render. Sometimes things are a little different. Now you can see a little bit of depth of field going on, a little bit of motion blur, so everything looks really nice, looks really, really cool. And then of course I would add more spheres into my render, and we are done with this design and this render. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned quite a few things here, and I will see you in the next video.